Thank you. Hello, I am Anna Froling, a member of the League of Women Voters, Rochester. I would like to welcome all of you tonight, the candidates, the audience, and those viewing at a later time, to this forum sponsored by the League of Women Voters, Rochester. We'd also like to thank our generous partners of tonight's forum, the Rochester Post-Bulletin, the Rochester Area Chamber of Commerce, and the Rochester Public Library for their help. The League of Women Voters is a volunteer organization active at the local, state, and national level to encourage citizens to participate in government. While we, as a league, do study and take stands on issues, we never endorse or oppose political parties or candidates. The views expressed in the forum are those of the candidates, not those of LWV Rochester or any partner or sponsor of this forum. And the sponsorship of this forum is not an endorsement of any candidate. It is our purpose in sponsoring this forum to provide you with an opportunity to hear candidates discuss face-to-face issues that are important to you. Tonight's questions have come from LWV Rochester, the Post-Bulletin, and the Chamber of Commerce, as well as members of our audience. You are welcome to submit as many written questions for the candidates as you like. Just hold up cards as you finish them, and a league volunteer will collect them throughout the forum. If you are watching the live stream, you may email questions to LWV Rochester at lwv.mn.org or lwvmn.org. Tonight's volunteers who are managing the questions are also league volunteers. Questions that are unclear, hostile, or of a personal nature will not be used. Given our format, your questions must relate to all candidates. Questions that fall in the same general area or which have been addressed in the opening statements may be consolidated to allow the moderator to cover as many topics as possible in the time allotted. We appreciate questions that are forward-looking rather than a review of past issues. If the answer was unclear to you, feel free to submit a follow-up question or to ask the candidate after the forum. Cards become the property of League of Women Voters Rochester. As there is never enough time to cover all the issues in a limited time and setting such as this, if your questions are not addressed tonight, please feel free to contact the candidate directly. You can find the candidate's contact information online at vote411.org or the Minnesota Secretary of State site. We'd like to thank all the candidates for running for office, for offering to serve their community, and for the enormous time, dedication, and commitment that running and serving demand. We encourage our members as individuals as we encourage each of you to get involved in your community and political party of your choice. Welcome to tonight's forum, which features the candidates for Rochester City Council, Ward 1. Welcome. Candidates for this seat are Andy Hemenway and Patrick Keane. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to offer an opening statement. The candidate will then respond in turn to questions provided by LWV Rochester, this evening's partners, and by the audience. Candidates will have 75 seconds to answer each question. The candidates will then have 2 minutes to make a closing statement. It isn't necessary to use the entire time for your answer, but please finish your sentence when your time is up. We would like to cover as many questions as possible. Each candidate also has 3 30-second rebuttal cards. These can be used at any point after each candidate has answered the question. Only 1 rebuttal card may be used per question. Please put the card in the basket after you have used it. I would like to remind the audience to remain quiet during the forum, hold your applause until the end of the forum, and to turn off all electronic devices. The timekeepers tonight are LWV Rochester member Kathy Magerline and Chris Pavick. Questions will be screened by LWV Rochester members Amy Lynn Connors and Mary Jones. And asking questions will be Randy Peterson from the Post-Bulletin and Ryan Parsons from the Chamber of Commerce. We will now hear the opening statements from each candidate. Candidates, you'll have 2 minutes to speak, and we determine order by a random drawing. And candidate Andy Hemenway, you will go first.
Thank you. Hello, for anybody that does not know me, I'm Andy Hemenway. To be honest, I have a little less political experience than my opponent. This is my first time running for office, but I have life experience. I grew up in Rochester, and I've grown with Rochester. I've resided in Southeast Rochester for what I consider my whole life, within about a 3-block radius. My wife's an in-home daycare provider in our house, and my daughter attends Ben Franklin Elementary School, the same school that I attended as a child. And during the day, I am a full-time registered nurse. Thinking back, I remember when IBM had more employees than IBM, had more employees than the Mayo Clinic. There was no DMC, only Roscoe's, Harnack Furniture, and Tropical Bowl. My first job as a child was through the Rochester Youth Employment Project. We biked to City Hall and filled out recipe cards. And our first job, I earned $3 to mow a lawn. And wow, that was incredible. I learned work ethic, respect, and how to listen. 90% of the people who needed help were widows living alone on paycheck to paycheck. Still common today, living paycheck to paycheck. I worked for Roscoe's, a small family-owned restaurant. I'm a firm believer in small, independently owned restaurants. Thank you, Barb and Steve. And I learned to listen, respect, and respond to people's requests and needs. More qualities I've acquired throughout growing up here that I can bring to the council. And as you know, as everything, our city is evolving. This is inevitable. We need to be reactive, responsive, and inviting to the diversity and growth that is upon us. Thank you. Andy Hemenway.
Thank you. And candidate Patrick Keane.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Patrick Keane, and I'm both a candidate and the incumbent in Ward 1. Let me introduce myself. I grew up in Chicago, and I came to Minnesota and then Rochester some 45 plus years ago for both an education and then for a great job. I purchased my Ward 1 home in 1985, where my wife Lori and I still reside. We raised our 3 adult children in that home, and they are now off taking responsibility for themselves and for others. They've all settled within 100 miles of Rochester, and we're the proud grandparents of 6 grandkids. After 35 years with IBM, I retired in 2015, and I started getting more involved with local government, volunteering, among other things. In my younger years, my community engagement was youth coaching, school volunteering, and church leadership positions. Closer to retirement, I got more involved in the city and county, and also some nonprofits and our local YMCA. I'm also an active member of our Morning Pride Lions Club. Rochester has been a great city for me and for my wife. I've enjoyed my time on council, and I learned quickly how to contribute towards an efficient, livable city, but there's so much more to do. I look forward to tonight's exchange. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move on to questions. And candidate Keane, you will go first, and then candidate Hemenway. And the first 2 questions will come from the League of Women Voters. And so the question is, the City Council has approved the Rochester Energy Commission proposal to reduce emissions citywide by 50% by 2030. How can this be accomplished?
So, the city, when you talk about the city doing this, the city has a lot of its own thing. We have a major fleet of cars, we have major buildings, and we're always looking for improvements for our sustainability there. But these goals deal more with the whole community. And the big thing going on, and it's been going on probably since 2016, was looking at how we get our electric energy for Rochester Public Utilities. Right now, we're a participant in SIMBA, or conglomeration of small cities that buy their energy through a lot of coal burning plants. The city, through our sustainability plans, made a plan to how to get off of that, and by 2030, we're going to be either generating our own electricity or getting it in other places through sustainable means. This is a huge change, and the really cool thing about it is this is not us saying, like, let's just give it a try and see what happens. This is the new passive energy now with solar and other ways is much less expensive than doing it through coal. So I think we're on a good path there. We're also dealing with some aspirational goals that we really haven't worked out plans for into the future, and I support that sort of initiatives.
Thank you. And candidate Hemenway.
This initiative, again, RPU began 2015. It was rolled out to become 100% renewable through solar energy, different forms of power. It is a good idea. The Rochester transit system is going to energy efficient buses, which is great. The city council really relies on the Energy Commission to bring back feedback and let us know, that this is evolving. It will happen on time. I think it's a great idea. I'm committed to seeing 100% renewable. Natural gas will be around for some time. It's a lot of people are dependent on that, including myself, and the costs are only going up. So the little bit a balance will be nice with the renewable forms, solar energy, and hopefully we can incorporate some the way it was today, some solar wind generators to compensate with that also. So thank you.
Thank you. The next question will also come from the League of Women Voters, and candidate Hemenway, you'll be first, and then candidate Keane. And the question is, the 2020 census showed the BIPOC community represents a significant and growing percent, 26.8%, of our city population. How can the city improve their participation on boards, commissions, and among staff?
I think the only way to do that would be to communicate solely with their communities, do outreach and talk to them, find out qualifications, who's qualified in the community, and educate and train. I mean, there's everybody is capable of doing almost anything. You set your mind to it and educate yourself, and I think they're diverse or not diverse. I think everybody deserves a chance and is capable of fulfilling those positions. There needs to be that outreach to them in the community. And I think the Diversity Council is available, and they can network with different groups and areas and churches in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Keane?
Yeah, it's hard not to notice that over the years our community has changed. Our population numbers have changed. The city had an initiative going for many years called GAR, and it's got to do with governments trying to become aware of what they can do, within government, but also within their communities to improve diversity, equity, and inclusion. You specifically talk about boards and these kinds of things, and I actually struggle with that because I think of trying to, the thought sometimes is how do we get like the 25 to 40-year-olds on boards, and how do we get people to be, joining some of these initiatives to help get input. And when I think of myself at those ages, I was not doing this kinds of stuff. I was busy trying to make my living and focusing on what I was doing. So I think those are hard challenges. The city did about, in a budget plan a couple years ago, hired a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer. And it has been very insightful for me to watch how this works. This is not new initiatives coming out of there, but it's working with each department, the fire department and how they recruit, the mayor's office and how we do things like how we get our boards things. It's been helpful, but it's been more like looking at systems and not just looking at affirmative action programs or equal counting numbers. It's been helpful work and useful.
Thank you. The next question will be candidate Keane first, and then candidate Hemenway, and it'll be from the Rochester Post Bulletin, Randy Peterson.
In a recent survey, the Rochester residents indicated a desire to have access to more housing options. What can the city do to encourage developers to create new housing choices in Rochester?
Housing is a daunting problem in Rochester. And there's some really great initiatives happening. I think the city has to acknowledge that we want to be a partner on housing, but we want to be a good partner, but we have to find those partnerships. The city participates in a big way in the Housing Coalition of Rochester that's run out of the Rochester Area Foundation. the county has recently stepped up in a huge way, funded $10 million of their $22 million or $17 million they got from ARPA, federal funding, and they're going to focus it on housing. But they're not going to sit down as the county and try to decide how to do that. They're going to work with the partners that are the Housing Alliance. They're going to work with the Rochester area builders. And I think those are some of the good things going on. The city does have a role in this. We've used, many cases, we used tax increment financing to help bring in affordable housing. We have made deals with city-owned property to try to get other sort of market rate housing. I think the key thing we've done, and I don't think people realize this enough, we get federal money from HUD, and what we use it for is for taking our existing housing stock and making sure it doesn't get degraded. There's a term called naturally occurring affordable housing, but we have to fix up our old houses because that's the best option for affordable housing.
Thank you. Candidate Hemenway.
Yeah, affordable housing, housing general is an interesting point. It's here to stay. I think the UDC was recently passed, and that'll give various options available. I think, again, like Patrick said, working with the Rochester Builders Association, the coalition, developers and landowners. I have a brother, he's a draftsman, and I see this daily. He's constantly developing and building and working with houses and developers, and it's amazing the structures that are going up everywhere, and it's still in demand. There's still a need. It's not just for affordable, but all levels of housing. The Maxfield study showed that. And so I think from a standpoint, if people want more diverse housing and stuff, I think they should do another study and get out to the people in the community and find out what they want and where the available space is to put those developments. I mean, it's their homes, it's our homes. We should live somewhere that we like and enjoy, and if that's what they want, the developers in Rochester is there to do it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next question will be candidate Hemenway first, and then candidate Keane, and it'll come from the Rochester Chamber of Commerce, Ryan Parsons.
Thank you. Good evening, candidates. Many factors contribute to a positive environment for business. That includes workforce, infrastructure, tax policy, and many more. So, if elected, how, as a member of the City Council, would you work to ensure that the Rochester area is a positive environment for business?
Growing up, I worked at a small family-owned business, and I know a lot of local business owners. Face value, they like access to those buildings, staffing, presentation, everything. I mean, the workforce, the infrastructure, the city streets to get there. It all builds on their quality of life and their business. We need to invest in those businesses. We need to invest in Rochester. Circulate the money, hire locally, the contractors, construction workers. You hire the locals, you spend the money in the local community. It goes back into those restaurants. It's sad to see that Potbelly's and Newt's and Rojo Jefe, the Mexican restaurant, the co-partner to Newt's, that they had to close down for specific reasons is, property taxes maybe. I've heard staffing, just little issues. There's not enough feet walking around downtown. The footsteps are, since Mayo Clinic, they took a lot of positions out. The street traffic just isn't there to maintain those. We should, get events and stuff downtown like the roller skating thing this weekend. That brought in plenty of influx of cash to the, thank you.
Thank you. And candidate Keane?
I got like 2 or 3 point answer for this, but to start, I did junior achievement for a couple years in the Rochester School, and there was this very simple diagram we do with like the third graders, and it was government, and then it was households, and then it was business. And it was this idea of like, the government doesn't, there really is private enterprise, and they need to run their own businesses. The government does have a responsibility to have roads and have a structure there, but there are going to be businesses wildly succeeding and failing all the time. That's built into the way we do, the way our system is set up. I think the government has to make sure, Andy mentions the things about high taxes. I mean, I think right now we have building valuations that are just unsustainable because the valuations, the rents can't support the valuations. That's got to change. And I think that's how our system works. It will change over time. It's not the government's job to come in and say, these people that are risk takers, starting businesses, we should know that some of them they're not always going to work, and we have responsibilities for households too. The other points in that is that we talked about that attract and retain. I think there's a lot of DMC investment going on right now, focusing on how do you get 20 and 30-year-old people to want to live in our city. It's an unclear answer, but that's a way that I think we really have to attract and retain employees.
Thank you. The next several questions will come from the audience, and it'll be candidate Keane first, and then candidate Hemenway. And the question is about computer and internet access. And this question came from an online audience member. Our community members of all ages need and rely on having internet access, but it is not affordable for many to have. How do you propose as a city council member to make internet access more available and affordable in the city?
I think as the person who asked the question points out, I mean, some of it was COVID really pointed out how critical internet access is for kids at home, trying to go to school, for people trying to work remotely, or for people just to get access to information they need to do their day-to-day lives. I know that our city worked a long time and decided not to include internet as a public utility, as some cities across the country have done. There's examples of where it's worked, and there's been fiascos with it. I don't know which one ours would have been, but what ended up happening over time is there's other competition coming in with Metronet. Our library, a department of the city, has done really creative stuff here with basically having I think it's like hotspots that they can loan out to people to take home and basically be able to do their schoolwork from remote homes and things like that. And I think it's been a great program, and I support it, and I would like to see it maybe expanded. But again, you've got to make sure you know the equity and balance of these sort of programs. Thank you.
Thank you. And candidate Hemenway.
To me, this makes me think of my parents. 87-year-old and an 88-year-old with no internet at home and no desire to, but a lot of people do need it. But there's facilities like the library that have access to it. The schools and the hotspot students can use it. But I was involved with a group in town, the Youth Commission, for many, many years. And the students there saw a need for internet for a lot of kids that didn't have access to it. And they went around to businesses, local businesses, Caribou, Starbucks areas, and they made a list of places who had free Wi-Fi that individuals could go to and use it to do their homework. And they approached these businesses, and the businesses were more than happy to let them come and use their internet. Some wanted you to, yes, buy a cup of coffee or something, but some were more willing. So these kids produced a list of about 35 locations where their classmates could go and do homework and use their Wi-Fi since they didn't have access to it at home. Like, again, 125 Live from a senior standpoint, and I know Medicare and UCare and some of those have the memberships where they can have free access to that internet there. So it is available. The prices should come down now that, yes, Metronet is here and there is competition and it's becoming more available and accessible to the population. So thank you.
Thank you. The next question again will come from the live audience, and candidate Hemenway, you'll go first, and then candidate Keane. And this is about child care. Please share what you know about how the lack of affordable child care is impacting Rochester's available workforce, and how the city council can help.
This is a struggle every day in my household. My wife does in-home daycare, and she gets calls, multiple calls a day of people that want to be in the Rochester area that are coming here, but they can't find childcare. People are dropping out of childcare as a profession daily and weekly because of the restrictions put on by the county, the state, other places. And there's a thought that they want all kids to go to centers for daycare and childcare, but they're not any more inexpensive. Most of them are actually more expensive, and it's amazing how the prices vary from one side of town to the other from a daycare provider stance, from northwest to southeast, the cost to the parent. And it's a very hard business. I give my wife kudos and everyone else that does it. It's very stressful and cumbersome, but they love it. And there does need to be more. They should be able to find training and access to training. And it's a great career for anyone, really. Thank you.
Thank you. And candidate Keane.
Could you say the question again, make sure I understand the...
Yep. Please share what you know about how the lack of affordable childcare is impacting Rochester's available workforce and how the city council can help.
Okay, and how... All right. When you talk about attracting and retaining workforce, there's all kinds of stories of women who can't go back to their jobs because they can't come up with childcare availability. And there's other examples of people trying to move here and saying they can't move because they can't get places for their kids. So clearly it impacts our community that way, and it's just a quality of life thing, but it's also an economic impact that our businesses can't grow the way they want because they can't get the employees they need. There's a couple of examples with the city. I've got a bad one where there's people come and say, hey, we want to buy this property off you, we want to put up a daycare, but we want to get it on the cheap. And there's times that I think the city has looked at that, and that specific one we didn't do. But recently there was something that happened in the northwest part of town with someone looking to come in and build a daycare, a child care thing, and it's a professional place, and it's big, and it's market rate. It's not affordable stuff, but the city did find a way to basically approve that within a zone and try to get that built, and I think it was a good thing we did towards contributing in some small way to the problem.
Thank you. The next question will come from an audience member. And the candidate Keane, you will go first, and then candidate Hemenway. And it's about the library. Rochester is an expanding community. As it expands, the city's departments need to expand. How do you think that the public library should grow with the city county?
Okay, the library, again, picture someone like me, 60-some years old, libraries are dramatically different places than they were when I was in high school or grammar school trying to use our local libraries. They're dramatically different places. In some cases, they've become much more of a community center. They've become much more of that third space. And most of these things in a good way. They become very supportive for certain communities. But they've also grown into things like what we talked about with the internet access or with homework helplines. Where I think what we get in trouble with is we start talking about there's sort of this morphing and changing. And I've watched this happen in business that there's times that you are getting on these new missions. And one thing that happens in government, they're usually come as like, okay, that's a net add to what you do. But I think in other places, in other businesses, there's more of an assessment of like, hey, we do want to do that, and we have these other things that aren't getting as much use. We have to end certain things to bring on the new things and not make them all new programs. So I should disclose that I'm on the Library Foundation Board. I really love to support our library in downtown, and I support many of the good things it's doing.
Thank you. And candidate Hemenway.
I see the library as an extension of our school system. I mean, the kids go to school, the library is here, the books are here, the books are there, it's an educational location. The social media aspect, the students get it there, they come here, that they learn. It's an extension of an education for everyone, children, adults alike. I think it should grow with the city. I don't, slowly but surely. There was discussion of a second library or branch. I don't know to the extent of that, but even if there was an outreach library, a smaller outreach location where stuff could be rotated through that had access for people that couldn't get downtown or get to another location through a state bonding or something to get the funds for that. But I think, yes, the library is a great place. It's here for education. It's here for our adult learners, and it's a training facility for people that want to go back to work and on the job. It's resources. You can't go wrong at the library. So thank you, Andy Hemenway.
Thank you, Candidate Hemenway. And Candidate Keane, you have a rebuttal? 30 seconds.
Less of a rebuttal. Andy makes the point of the extension of school, and I think there is a lot of that. But I just want to, like an antidote, you would be amazed the number of people moving to Rochester will call first and see what kind of collections the library has, what languages do we have, what things like that. And it is a phenomenal resource for that, attracting and retaining employees. And I'm kind of floored. I would never be the person that would know that, but since my insights, I find it to be another community asset that really helps with that retaining and attracting employees.
Thank you. Next question will come from the League of Women Voters, and I will have Candidate Hemenway go first, and then Candidate Keane. And the question is, do you support the Bicycle Master Plan, which prioritizes improvements on 10 routes for walkers, wheelchairs, and strollers, and bikes?
I am an active individual. I'm a firm believer in an active lifestyle, and I believe anything outdoors is wonderful. So I would be a component for that. I think not only especially for individuals with wheelchairs and those individuals that don't have access to things like that. Years ago, with the Youth Commission, again, we advocated for an all-terrain vehicle for the parks for Corey Hill and Chester Woods and stuff, so people that were not ambulatory could get out and about on the trails. It's an antidepressant in itself. And for people that are wanting to go 100% renewable, you can ride into Rochester on your bicycles and in your chairs. And with electric bikes now, the commute time is much faster. And they just need the parking and the access downtown for the bikes and so forth. So, yes, I would be for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Keane?
On active transportation, it's kind of a new name. We used to call it the bicycle trails plan, things like that. The city does have a policy called complete streets. So when we're doing new streets, we have to think about all users of that street, whether it be delivery trucks, whether it be automobiles, whether it be pedestrians, bicycles. A complete street really puts the onus on the design of the thing to be for everybody and not just for cars. The specific thing that with the active transportation is we've had these studies looking at what I'll call the gaps. You've got these wonderful trails that Public Works did when they were doing stormwater management, and then they end, and you've got to ride on some busy street to get to the next connection. And those are the sort of things that are making up the priorities of where those gaps are. And I do support that. There are things, though, like, and I don't see them in Rochester yet. I know there's some I've been talked to about where you'll see a bike lane and then the turning lane is on the other side and they're in the middle of the traffic. And it looks crazy to me. It does not look like something I would do. I've been in Chicago, and the bicycle delivery guys are mixed in with the cars, and it just looks awful. I'm really much more of a trail guy, and I think that's, as much as we can link our trail system and keep the bicycles separate from the cars, the better off we'll be.
Thank you. Now our next question will be from the Post Bulletin from Randy Peterson.
Affordable housing projects often face pushback from neighbors. How much should neighborhood concerns be balanced with the city's goal of creating more affordable housing?
Yeah, it's a serious question. I mean, the negative view would be that, oh, nobody ever wants a change in their neighborhood. They're always going to be mad about it. And the more positive view is, how can you have zoning that says this is an R1 neighborhood, and then somebody buys into it and takes care of their home, and then 5 years later, someone's building a huge apartment complex. There does seem to be something wrong there. And I think the right way to approach this isn't on individual cases. It really is in that unified development plan where you really have the kind of the rules laid out and the policies in place that say, hey, this is an R1 neighborhood, which means these things, or it's an R2X neighborhood and it means these things, or it's R3. And you basically have policies that guide this, and not these sort of things we've had lately is where almost all of our apartment complexes, they don't get built based on our zoning. They get built because they come and say, I want an exception. And we want to get away from that exceptions. That's really one of the driving forces behind the UDC. And I think it will help with more of those things in the future.
Thank you. Candidate Hemenway.
I think the city, the communication with the neighborhoods, communication, having meetings, multiple meetings, getting general feedback from those areas. But I think the city does a phenomenal job. If you think about where a lot of these structures have gone up, it's been at major intersections off of 20th Street and 11th Avenue, or off of 12th and Marion Road, or down on 4th Street, the flats on 4th and all that. The areas are not excessively residential, and the rates of crime in those areas have not gone up. I remember when the one on 20th Street and 11th went up, there was concern in the Meadow Parks neighborhood about an increase of traffic on 20th Street, Mayo High School, and Willow Creek, and a lot of people talked, and it was a big concern, but it was very minimal change. So they do a great job out by 65th where they're putting them. They're along the bus routes, the bike trails. They're making it accessible for alternative transportations, and they are little in-hill hubs, or if you think about the way they were talking, the grocery stores are there, the bus routes, everything. There's job opportunities where those places are being built. So again, they're doing a great job. So thank you.
Thank you. Next question, candidate Hemenway, you'll be first, and then candidate Keane. And the question comes from the Rochester Chamber of Commerce, Ryan Parsons.
We're nearing the 2023 legislative session. With each legislative session comes activity, priorities for the city of Rochester. If elected to the city council, what would you view as priorities for the city of Rochester? Legislative priorities.
I would have to say that from a legislative standpoint, the priorities would be just general public safety, getting the city council does a great job of funding all of that. It's our major fund for public safety, and then the public works going out and just keeping our infrastructure safe and solid. I mean, keeping the roads clear, keeping everything clean. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. And then candidate Keane.
Well, I feel bad for Andy. He's a little bit of a loss with that question. No, because again, you wouldn't know that unless you're closer to it. I have been, one of my initiatives in office has been to be part of our team that goes and, for lack of a better word, lobbies our representatives and the state to try to say, these are the things that are important to Rochester. My number one over the next 2 years is our local option sales tax. We have a half-cent sales tax that we need the state to improve based on projects that we want to do. And I think it's a good thing for the citizens of Rochester because it helps fund our projects with money that's other than our levy money. So that's a really important one to me. Number two is our bonding projects. We failed in 2022 to get any bonding projects approved at the state because we fell into an election year where there was enough conundrums that nothing got passed, including a lot of small towns in the area that wanted to do important water reclamation plants that just aren't getting done. That's another one. The third one is, again, another important thing is local option sales tax. There's an algorithm that works out local option sales tax that has just been crushing Rochester over the last 5 years. We get about $1 million less a year from the state because the way they work this algorithm out says, oh, you built something new, you get less money. We really need to get help with that.
Okay, and thank you. It's only 45 minutes, and so we reached the end, and we're going to now move on to closing statements. And by random draw, the drawing was that candidate Keane will go first, and then candidate Hemenway. And you each have 2 minutes. So candidate Keane.
Okay. All right. Again, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting tonight, the League, the Chamber, the Library, and the Post Bulletin. One of the hardest things about running for local office is getting heard by the voters, and you are making that possible for us tonight. Thank you. As I said earlier, I worked for IBM for 35 years in a job that I really liked, and one of the great privileges of my life was being able to retire in my mid-50s. My retirement allowed me to self-direct my time without the worries of a mortgage or the demands of a corporate boss. I didn't get into government, but I did find myself getting involved in things like the brand new Police Policies Oversight Committee, and I was on the county's Human Services Advisory Board. I ended up getting assigned to the Zoning Board of Appeals because no one else wanted to be on there. Over time, I grew to appreciate the impact the government can have on our lives, impact both positive and negative. Over time, and because of opportunity, I ran in 2018, and I was successful. Now I am back in front of you, running on my voting record, running on the advocacy that I've done to help improve so many initiatives in Ward 1, and I'm running with the energy and the empathy to guide our city into the future. So here's a little twist. I come here tonight hoping to win your support. I think I have much to offer, and I think the city would be best served by my continued representation. But our city will be fine no matter who wins. I know Andy Hemenway is a capable citizen with a strong interest in our city. I worked with Andy's dad at IBM, and I know Andy as a dedicated athlete, a family man, a medical professional, with a really good reputation in our community. I was miffed when he put in his name to run against me without calling or talking to me, but I guess I assume he has his reasons for that. I will continue to make myself available in the coming 4 weeks. Use my website, use whatever numbers you have, use Vote 411. My information's out there. If you have questions, I'd love to speak to you.
Thank you. And candidate Hemenway.
I planned on being brief. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. Thank you, League of Women Voters, Post Bulletin, the library, anybody that's on live. This is a new experience for me, but I am vested in Rochester. I grew up here. I went to Ben Franklin, Willow Creek, Mayo High School. I graduated there. I've been a registered nurse in the area for well over 20 years. Inpatient and outpatient, and I love this city just as much as Pat. We are all vested in it, otherwise we would not be here, any of us. And I've been involved in the county and youth commission, and volunteered at the Salvation Army, and done planted thousands of trees throughout the community with our neighborhoods. And I love the trail system. I love Rochester. It's a great place. The people are great. I think we need to reiterate that and bring Rochester back to what Rochester is rooted in. It's a great city, and we're all here to build on that. So thank you very much, and thank you again for having us and presenting.
Thank you, candidates. That concludes our forum tonight. I would like to thank each of the candidates for participating in tonight's forum. Thank you for your service to the community and for your willingness to participate in the democratic process. Thank you. And I would like to remind you that the views expressed in the forum tonight were those of the candidate, not those of LWV Rochester or any partner or sponsor of the forum. LWV posts complete unedited recordings of these forums. Editing is authorized only for official media reporting. Excerpts or edited clips of candidate forums may not be used for partisan political purposes. I want to thank our partners, the Rochester Area Chamber of Commerce and the Rochester Post Bulletin, as well as the Rochester Public Library for hosting us. Remember that Election Day is November 8th, and early voting about your polling place, would like to see your sample ballot or learn more about the candidates, visit vote411.org. Please note your polling place may have changed due to redistricting, and mine was, I know. Election information is available on the brochures that you got, and also you have a Vote 411 in your on the seats when you came in. I want to thank you all for coming tonight, and have a good evening.